So, you've got gas. No, not that type of gas. I'm talking about gear acquisition syndrome. If you're a photographer, you already know what gas is. At this point, it's basically become a meme in the photography community. And for those of you who are still confused, let me explain. Gear acquisition syndrome is when someone is buying photography equipment almost compulsively, way more than they really need to. They're probably going to be spending more time watching gear reviews than actually going out to take photos. This is usually accompanied by something called photographer math.
Here we see Ted. See how desperate he is to purchase this camera? Too bad, Ted. You don't seem to have the funds to buy it. But watch this. Here comes photographer math. With the power of delusion, Ted can now sell his existing gear to fund the new camera, essentially making the new camera free. Photographer math, won't you try it? Photographer math is typically a symptom of gear acquisition syndrome.
It's pretty obvious that if you're spending all your time thinking about gear instead of taking photos, then you're not going to improve as a photographer. And I seriously doubt that most people got into photography because they wanted to collect a bunch of cameras. Then why do we end up in the cycle of being obsessed with gear rather than photography itself? That's exactly what I started to think about with the recent release of the Fuji X100VI. Now, I don't need the X100VI at all. I have plenty of cameras that I love and I still use, but I still found myself wanting one. I was telling myself things like, I could save money by switching to digital and just using film simulations. I haven't even been photographing that much lately. Maybe this camera will inspire me to get out there. If everyone's buying the X100VI, then I can find an X100V for less. But instead of just saying I've got gas and emptying my bank account for this camera, I looked further into why I'm thinking this way, and better yet, how to change it. After doing some research, I think that there's really three major reasons for that feeling of gas. The first of which is how gear affects our status, identity, and our social standing. So let me give you a quick example of what that means. I'm going to say the name of a camera brand, and I want you to picture the type of photographer that would use that camera brand. Let's start with Fujifilm. I mean, film is just so damn expensive nowadays. Dude, you're still shooting film? You should get a Fuji, man. They can like replicate film perfectly. Yeah, I totally got Reala Ace loaded into my camera, if you know what I mean. And maybe Nikon? I mean, film is just so damn expensive nowadays. Film? I used to shoot film back in the day, but ever since I got my trusty D850, I've never looked back. Want to see some photos of my cat? Let's try Leica. I mean, film is just so damn expensive nowadays. Yeah, after I bought my Leica, the film prices seemed irrelevant anyway. Dude, have you tried zone focusing on a Leica? It's like faster than autofocus. Hold up. Let me meter the light. Okay, you guys get the idea here. But just by thinking of a camera brand, you can picture a whole person. This fact alone should tell you how deeply our identities are tied to the brands that we use. But what I'm really trying to get at here is the idea that a photographer's choice of gear is rooted in their need to belong to a community which understands and accepts them. A community within which they can enjoy a social standing based on the type of gear they own. And most photographers stick to one brand, which tends to be the one that most closely aligns with their identity. Let's say I'm a hobbyist photographer that loves to shoot Fuji cameras. Then most likely I will tend to meet and spend time with other Fuji shooters. In fact, I might have even been influenced by my friends to purchase a Fuji camera to begin with. Now, if that is my community, then purchasing something like the X100VI would be a means to distinguish myself from my peers. It's a signal to others that I'm serious about my photography and that I have good taste in cameras. That's just a very specific and relevant example based on what's going on right now. This could really be applied to any piece of gear that is new or sought after. So, with our identities, social standing, and status all tied up in the purchase of a new piece of equipment, is it even a surprise that we fall victim to gas? This video isn't sponsored, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to plug some of my work. I'm a wedding photographer based out of Toronto. My wedding photography is all about embracing the imperfect nature of real moments. My style is based on a documentary style approach, which frees you up to really be present in all the most important parts of your wedding day. I give my couples guidance every step of the way, and my goal is to make wedding day photography fun again. So if you're getting married, or maybe you know someone who is, share my website with them. I'll leave a link to the website in the description below, and let's get back to the video. Let's dive deeper and discuss the second major reason why we experience gas, and that is the performance enhancement effects which can accompany new gear. It's no secret that typically individuals will purchase gear with the belief that it will help them improve in their craft. This belief can be for a variety of reasons. In photography, a new piece of equipment can change your creative process, allowing you to be more creative or creative in a different type of way. For example, if someone who is used to shooting film tries a digital camera, they might find themselves free to photograph a lot more often than they would typically be used to, which in turn can lead them to discover new things about photography. Then there's the actual technical specifications of a new piece of gear, which can unlock a brand new type of photography. The example here would be purchasing a telephoto lens in order to photograph wildlife. We could also consider that buying new gear can also encourage a photographer to practice more, which in the long run will improve their photography. However, not all photographers are driven by these beliefs. Instead, they tend to be driven by the belief that the new piece of gear will make them a better photographer. That instant gratification is what makes buying gear so damn satisfying. With that being said, let's move on and discuss the final reason for why we experience gas. It's no secret that purchasing new gear makes us feel good, and this emotion is really what's at the heart of gas. Because like an addict, we're always chasing that high we get after buying new gear. Now this comes with many strong emotions, starting with the anticipation of purchasing a new piece of gear. This is where the euphoria starts to kick in. Then comes the excitement of trying something different and unfamiliar. This novelty is heightened by the internal validation we have constructed for choosing that new piece of equipment in the first place, as well as the external validation that comes with obtaining a highly sought after piece of equipment. However, these wonderful feelings have to subside eventually. After using the new piece of gear for a while, we'll get used to it. The reality of the money we spent sets in, the novelty wears off, and we habituate to it. These negative feelings lead us to search for the next high, the next thing which will bring us joy and happiness. Now to me, this stage right here is the true beginning of the cycle of gear acquisition syndrome. And that is because when we're experiencing negative emotions, that is when we're most vulnerable to influence and impulsive actions. When we are in a negative mind state, we naturally seek to feel good, which can in some people lead to compulsive behavior. Buying gear becomes a sort of therapy. It's basically a cope. Stressed? Buy a new camera body. It makes everything easier. Anxious about your work? Buy a new lens. That'll help. Frustrated your photography isn't improving? Switching camera brands should fix the problem. Suddenly, whenever we need to deal with negative emotions, we turn instead to purchasing camera equipment. Now that we actually have an idea of how gas can affect us, I want to look at some reasons why it's so prevalent in our niche. I think it's because so much of our conversations as photographers are based around gear, whether that's on YouTube or Reddit or even in person. And no medium is safe because even in film photography, so many of our conversations still center around like cameras, lenses, film stocks, you get the idea. We love to talk about gear, and that's understandable. I mean, it's a fun topic to talk about. But the dangerous part of this dialogue is really crafted by the camera brands themselves. They love to promote the idea that buying their newest gear will make you a better photographer. And with so much sponsored content, their messaging is constantly in our face through our social feeds. So much so that when a new camera comes out, it basically feels like that's the only thing people are posting or talking about. If you combine this constant barrage of new gear with the fact that it's easier than ever to borrow money, it basically ends up with almost every photographer, especially new ones, falling victim to gas, causing us to buy gear that we don't really need because we want to, or just want to feel good. Environments are set up to ensure that we fail, and in turn basically make more profits for the camera companies. But there is a way out of this, with the first step being to become aware of the problem. So as a starting point, I think reframing what gas is would help to better understand how to overcome it. Gear acquisition syndrome is a symptom of underlying issues rather than an actual condition, which in short means that your desire for a new piece of gear isn't the problem. It's why you have that desire in the first place. I'm gonna change gears and let's talk about basketball for a second here. So, did Kobe Bryant become a great basketball player because of the shoes he wore? Was it because someone showed him a technique that he'd never seen? Or maybe it was the mentors he had along the way who taught him the game? I'm sure all these factors did contribute to his success, but what truly made Kobe Bryant a great basketball player was the time he spent studying the game and practicing his skills. It was the multitude of unseen hours he spent with a basketball in his hand, pushed by the mindset of wanting to be the best. And so, photography is no different. It is the hours you spend taking photos and the mindset of self-improvement which make you a better photographer. Okay, that's enough reframing. Let's get into some practical tips. So as a quick disclaimer, I'm not perfect. I have fallen victim to gas many times, but I will say that I've gotten way better at dealing with it thanks to some of these tips. The most useful method I personally have found to work for me is to schedule my photography as a practice. So I find that if I'm out consistently doing photography, then I'm not really thinking about new gear. I'm focused on the craft, as well as improving my skills, which brings me more inspiration and happiness than any gear purchase ever has. So if you've got to commute from work, start bringing your camera with you. Schedule some time in the morning to walk around your neighborhood and take photos. Just incorporate photography into your daily life, even if it's a short amount of time. Whenever you start to go down the rabbit hole of looking to buy new stuff, force yourself to go out and photograph something. This can be anything really, just look up a photography challenge and go do it. You can experiment with a lens you don't typically use, try photographing on your phone. You can even message a friend to go out on a photo walk with. You basically want to redirect the desire for new equipment into actually going out and practicing photography. You also have to find ways to avoid temptation. That means if you've got a social feed full of gear content, you have to find a way to get away from that or limit it. You also want to try to limit any potential avenue for temptation by changing your social feeds, whether that's Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, whatever your poison is. For me, I know that YouTube is what tends to make me want to buy new gear. So what I've done is curated my feed so that I no longer see those gear reviews. I did that either by unsubscribing or just blocking channels that only do gear content. You can tie the purchasing of new equipment with monetary goals. So that would look something like this. If I earn a promotion this year, I'll treat myself to a new lens. Or if I make X dollars in bookings this year, I'll treat myself to a new camera body. This way you have an added motivation to accomplish real life goals because you know that there's a reward waiting for you. Now, it's important to note here that you have to be reasonable with the purchases and goals that you set. If you get a raise of $5,000 and you spend all of it on gear, then that's counterproductive. If you're really lusting after a new piece of gear, then check to see if you can rent it. Renting costs significantly less than buying gear, and it will fulfill some of the desires that come with gas. New gear does tend to be difficult and sometimes impossible to rent, but you can typically find rental gear that is similar to that new piece of gear that you want. If photography is a hobby of yours, look into ways of making money with your photography skills. There's just so many ways to make money from photography, you kind of just have to go out there and look. Use the money you earn through photography to purchase new gear. This way you'll get better at photography and you'll have new gear. For any professional photographers out there, don't do this. You have to run a business and buying gear can quickly turn your profits into debts. Just remember that these tips are methods on how to deal with gas. I don't think there's really a way to stop it completely. Our goal is to reduce the feelings of wanting new gear, and then when we do have those feelings, to redirect them to practicing photography. Alright, to wrap up this video, I want to issue you all a challenge. After seeing all of the X100VI content floating around, I found myself thinking about buying gear again, but I'm not going to. And instead, I'm gonna do a photography challenge this week. I'm gonna go out and only photograph in black and white. So if you're also thinking about buying the X100VI, but you know you don't need it, then join me in this challenge. Let's get out there and make some photos.